Welcome to the Revolution Church podcast.
I gotta find all my stuff. Here it is. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How's it going? Sponsored by Adidas today. Yo, dog. Got my summer outfit on, and there's a little story behind this shirt. It's a little tight right here. I just tried it on. I was literally just trying the shirt on. And this is the story about this shirt. Is I had this shirt in high school. This exact shirt, well, not this exact one, but I had the shirt in high school. And it was a Gap shirt. And me and my buddy Bo both really loved it. And we would trade it back and forth. Like, they were doing all these, like, patterns, all these, like, tiny, like, all the patterns were super small. And so this was one that me and my buddy, my best friend, we used to share back and forth to wear to school, and we'd always button our shirts up to the top because we were preppy. Hey, bro, what's up? And so I saw one. It's a Gap. This is the actual year, and it was at a Goodwill, and now it's back. I sent this picture to my buddy, Bo, and he thought it was hilarious. Anyway, so there you go. That's my shirt story, why I look like I'm on Hawaiian vacation with my funny hat and my funny shirt. Today we are going to get into, probably right away, what I've realized though is I need a table. I need to get a table for this area in my life because I'm running out of room. I got so much stuff and I don't have a table. I got a chair, now I need a table. So that's where Revolution's going. But today we're going to talk about Hegel. And we're really going to strip down Hegel's belief system in Christianity. I mean, not strip it. I mean, we're going to simplify it because it is a lot of his writings on Christianity. His early writings are a little bit more approachable for spirituality and Christianity. Later writings for Hegel are almost impossible to understand. So I'm going to try to strip those down a little bit. I did this a few years ago. I did this similar talk about Hegel, but the reason I want to do it is because I feel that I already needed my notes. It deserves repeating, and I don't think it should be obscure or just for those in academia. I think it's something that we should all see and understand and realize. Like, this is a very revolutionary way of looking at Christianity, very similar to probably the way Zizek would talk about Christianity, Peter Rollins would talk about Christianity, folks like that, kind of. So it kind of follows into a long line of, not a long line, a short queue, if you will, of people's thoughts about Christianity. But I believe it's vitally important. And so I guess we're kind of looking at Hegel's philosophy and theology today on God. So thanks for joining me. Glad you guys are here. And we're going to kind of go right into it. Not kind of, we are. Hegel believed Christianity offered a philosophical insight that no other religion did. So you've got kind of that kind of that Christianity evangelicals really loved, like, oh, it's special. And Hegel felt that Christianity kind of had a special thing about it. And we're going to talk about why that is. That no other religion did. And it really had a really great philosophical insight, not just a theological insight, but philosophy, and it influenced his philosophy. And a lot of people think Hegel is almost unreadable. But I will tell you this, if you start to try to understand Hegel, and you start to kind of try to get into that world a little bit, when you move from Hegel to like Kierkegaard or or Kant or other people like that, those people seem to be a little bit easier to read once you've tried to like read Hegel, because reading Hegel is like really tough. Like I read books about Hegel, and a lot of my talk from today will be coming from a book about Hegel called Emancipation After Hegel, by Todd McGowan, who I got to see speak in Ireland quite a few years ago, and he was really amazing. And it's funny thing is, I remember seeing this book. He hadn't even come out yet, and he gave a copy to Pete because he was speaking at an event for Pete Rollins, and one of the things that he was trying to say was, it's funny, I have these neighbors, and they talk so loud. Like I don't understand. Like they're always so loud. I'm wondering if one of them's losing their hearing. Anyway, so not my downstairs neighbors, outdoor neighbors, but I met him, and I remember looking at this book, thinking like, oh, I have zero interest in that book because I have zero interest in Hegel, and that's just not in my wheelhouse, if you will. And so here I am years later, and this is probably one of my favorite books. And the reason I took my paint pens and put 2 blue stripes on it is so whenever I throw it into a bookshelf, I can just find it right away, because it really was the kind of the book, the gateway drug to Hegel. So it looks like I'm recommending a lot of books now. I'm doing about things that really inspire me on Instagram. And obviously books and probably music are going to be the 2 main things, and film. So Hegel believed that Christianity offered a philosophical insight that no other religion does. And he believed that the really key to Christianity, and how ironic is this, is divine humiliation. So that divine humility was what made Christianity worth its weight in gold to him. What made it stick out and it wasn't just humility, it was humiliation. And one of the things I was thinking that we should all kind of maybe try to vibe with and think about and feel a little bit, and I can't make anybody feel anything, but is this idea of I think we've all been in these places where we've been humiliated, we've been hurt, we've been through bad things. I mean, look, I'm wearing a t-shirt because it reminds me of high school. I mean, that's kind of like, because I had it in high school, kind of humiliating and silly, but I like it. But this idea of what humiliation can do for us. And so his divine humiliation was the death of Christ on the cross. Basic ideas behind Christianity. You walk into almost any church, and there's either a cross or a crucifix. I remember as a child going to my parents took me to Israel, and it was the first time I had seen people with machine guns. Now you see cops with machine guns and things like that, but back then you didn't see that. This must have been in the mid-early 80s, and mid-80s sometime. And but I got a crucifix in the Holy Land, and it was wood, and it had a little metal Jesus on it. And I thought it was the most beautiful thing. And I remember getting back from the Holy Land and wearing it, being so proud of it, and having this woman come up to me and said to me, "My Jesus isn't on a cross anymore." And she looked at my necklace and she goes, "We don't wear those because our Christ has risen, and risen indeed." You know, and I remember as a kid being like, wow, thanks for making me feel like crap and like hating my necklace. And asking my dad about it, and I guess he probably gave me something about, well, you know, Catholic, we don't really, you know, it's not a big deal. I remember I had a peace symbol at one time, and my dad's like, well, you know, that's, you know, supposedly an upside down broken cross, and, you know, it's not, but Christians always were looking for something to critique, you know. I mean, we're always like talk about like a cultish vibe, like, I've always felt like Christianity is always like, it's just watching. It's not God who's watching you. It's the other ones. It's the other Christians or the other Catholics or the other people, the other religion who are watching you to tell you, oh, you're not doing what we're supposed to do. But there is something kind of behind this, is that a lot of evangelicals and a lot of Protestants kind of got away from this idea of the crucified Christ and kind of started focusing on the risen Christ, which is strange because you would have thought with the Reformation happening with Martin Luther that we would have been a lot more focused on the crucifixion of Christ. And then everybody's like, oh, no, it's the risen Christ, and the power over death and all this stuff. And so we just kind of glorified it. And what Hegel thought about that kind of thinking was that it was denying the essence of Christianity, and that it was in some ways heresy. What we were doing is that we were literally just turning Christianity into a religion of any other religion that was just, fair play. And a lot of people feel that way about religion, and that's fine. I'm not here to tell you you have to think like me or be like me. That's not what I'm here to do. Unfortunately, a lot of people in the religion of Christianity think that their job is to tell you what to do and not be humbled or even humiliated. Those are the last things they want to deal with. So for another thing for Hegel, it was the idea of the infinite showing itself finite. So the infinite here, God, and then crucifixion shows that this infinite is finite. My God, why have you forsaken me? The night before, Lord, let this cup will pass. It wasn't like, hey, this is going to be awesome, And you think about that, the Gospels being later written, that it must have been so entrenched of this, like, I don't even think we really grasp the intentions of the intensity of Christ's probably nervousness of this death, of this cross that he was going to bear because of that. But it is kind of beautiful that those things are in there, that he's like, if this cup can pass from me, if this isn't going to happen, that we got those in the Gospels. And it's interesting to say, like, one of the first bits of graffiti that was found near Rome, where Rome was a picture of a God. It was mocking a crucified God. As one of the first pieces of graffiti that is reported is this, the cross and a God on the cross, and that, like, how foolish this would be for a God to be crucified. So, this isn't in ways that we think, because we've retrained our ways to think about the cross. You think about, like, growing up evangelical, gosh, it was always about the resurrection. That's how the Passion plays were ended, and it was like, oh, and the angels singing and all this stuff, and Carmen counting down backwards, 5, 4, 3, and the champion, why is he counting? The devil's like, why is he counting backwards? The champion. We want this idea to almost, this idea of resurrection to cover. And the funny thing is that Jesus comes back with scars in the Bible. In the resurrection, Jesus comes back, scars, like this. He was beaten, bloody, and he's a scarred, wounded body. And we often think of, like, because it's religion, we just romanticize it. And from what I can understand of what Todd McGowan is writing about Hegel, and from what I've understood some of my ventures out into Hegel, is that this was not something that Hegel thought we should be doing. Hegel believes that this event strips all authority from the divine. So he believed that the crucifixion is all of the authority was ripped from the divine. There was no, like, well, just wait 3 days, people were like, well, maybe, like you hear, the Roman soldiers are like, well, maybe he'll call down Jesus, or maybe, is he calling for Elijah? Maybe Elijah will come and save him, mocking him. And some people think that maybe Judas was trying to just kind of push Jesus a little bit to call in the the angels and rule in Jerusalem and things like that. But this idea that this event, God loses everything. God loses God's self. Christ becomes an atheist on a cross. I remember I said that once on a news channel. Oh my gosh, I got so many letters from people and like emails from people telling me how horrible I was for saying Jesus was an atheist. Because Jesus goes, my God, why have you forsaken me? People were very, very upset about that. But I think it's a point worth looking at. And so I'm going to read this small part of McGowan's book here so we can kind of get a more articulate idea of what's being said here. But here we are, Hegel's idea is that Jesus is the pure example of God giving up his power as God and being completely humiliated on the cross. And that this is something that's valuable. Like if we do not focus on it, we are heretics. And this is what Todd McGowan says about Hegel. His thoughts on this. The divine humiliation that Christianity enacts follows directly from the Christ's message of love. A loving God, or a God capable of love, cannot be a pure substance, but must be subject. Only a divided subject can love, because only divided subjects turn to the others to look for corresponding divisions. So love, this back and forth. The message of love initially draws Hegel to Christianity, but it is the humiliated God entailed by love that sustains Hegel as a devotee. And this is why Hegel would have claimed Christianity as his faith, is that love, this back and forth, this love of this humanity of God, this divide, that God was actually a divided subject, was really amazing to Hegel. But then the fact that God was even willing to be humiliated sustained what Hegel was, because he said this is a great moment of the divided, of God as the divided. This is, in Hegel's way, he saw it as the end of something, like the end of history is what he says, but I'm not going to get into all that because it's so philosophical that it breaks my head. What I'm trying to do is get us to get to a place where we can kind of grasp a little bit of what Hegel's saying and ask ourselves, is this the type of theology that's worth following? Is there something here? Is there something that shows us that we can identify with? And have we missed something in the past? And, have well-intended people just fallen into folly and into tradition and into just bad theology? It would be my question. What this means is God of Christianity suffers from the same contradictions as we do. Now, that's a really hard pill to swallow, is that God would have contradictions, that God would have a need for love and a need for this thing, but also that God is willing to give up God's power and be completely humiliated. And which is, I guess, pretty interesting that you could argue God, a powerful God, giving up power, but this idea of being completely humiliated and staying there. This is the argument, is staying within that, is that the resurrection isn't this concept of victory. The resurrection, Jesus doesn't come back and like kill all the guys. He doesn't like, I'm here to kick ass, Like the book of Revelation doesn't happen. That's what it's a fantasy book. It's a book of like wishing revenge. Jesus doesn't walk through the streets covered in blood, killing Roman soldiers. That's not what happens. Jesus comes back, disciples, talks to a couple of his disciples, they poke holes, they put their fingers in the scars. He says a few sweet things and then poof, up he goes, that's it. That's the magical point. And a lot of, Gospels, some of the Gospels added the resurrection later. I'm not saying there was no resurrection or not, but what I'm saying is the focus was on the crucifixion. The focus was on the death of God, if you will. And the infinite shows itself stripped of all power and stays there. It stays there, stripped of that power. So why don't we see more of this? And why don't we see more of this in the church today, and Hegel and this kind of like Hegel's ideas of Christianity? And why is it like when someone like, Zizek or Peter Rollins or, Todd McGowan bring this up and we go, oh, ooh, interesting, and, why don't we see it or hear this? What's the wall in the way of understanding this type of faith? And the wall is the church. I would argue maybe all of Protestantism, not just like evangelicals, that we don't really live in this. Because I see this need for control and this need for victory, not just in like evangelical conservative circles, but I've seen it within Lutheran and progressive church circles of like, our team is going to win type of thing, that our God is in control and it's just a mystery, but God is going to work this out. And what Hegel is arguing is that we've got it wrong. I don't know if he's arguing we got it right. He's arguing for this idea, and this idea would say that we've got it wrong. And we've become this very victory-based type of faith. But I think if anyone lives life on life's terms, we know that suffering and loss and struggle are more a part of the reality of life that we live in than than victory. We live in America. Well, we're number one, and we've got some great things here, but we've also got a lot of shit here, and we're starting to see like things fall apart and more people becoming homeless. And I live in Seattle, and I see all these people addicted to heroin and opioids and all these just like zombies on the streets. It's crazy to see what's happening in the world. And in this country and what we're doing to other people. But then if you actually start to read the news in other countries, you go like, oh, these people are suffering through a lot of hell as well. So I think this concept of God, the divided God, the humiliated God, the humiliated Christ makes a lot more sense than this, victory in Jesus, my Savior. I mean, it's a great song, and I want to win. But I've had a lot more devastating pain than like really exciting victories in my life. I'm just saying, could there be something to that? But the church puts up this wall, and I saw this clip today, and I've never been a huge critic of Joel Osteen, to be honest with you. I just always thought, oh, he's kind of this happy-go-lucky, like mega preacher, whatever, just not really. I've met with him once about LGBTQ rights, but he wasn't like, like, oh, gee, he wasn't like this like real legalistic bastard. And But then when I saw this clip today, I was like, oh, he really is selling like this kind of completeness and like this wholeness, and that like God's going to fill that void that you have. And I just don't believe that. I believe that grace allows you to accept the void, accept that you are accepted with the void. It's not filling the void. It recognizes the void so you can live life, and that you can live with contradictions, and you can fix the contradictions you can and live with the ones that you can't. So anyhow, the church is acting as a mediator, which is ironic because they deny this, but kind of a churchy thing to do. And God's, the church, welcome to God's house, and that type of thing, will tell you how to live, or what God can do for you, or what you should be doing for God. And so it's keeping this like communicator with God, like, and keeping God kind of like separate from keeping really the contradictions of God from becoming evident. Really, is what it's doing. We're God's house and we're more than conquerors, blah, 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 and then the preacher falls, and then this falls, and this happens, and people fall apart, and you realize not everything that's shiny is gold, so it's really strange. And that's why I don't really like going to church, or ever really went to churches, because I didn't like I didn't like feeling like I was, and I'm going to do a talk, I think, on this, is how the church felt like you had joined The Firm, like the movie The Firm, and like, people are watching you and they're like, and then, you're meeting with the pastor because you're dating the wrong person, or because you're doing that, it's like, what the heck is going on here? Oh, Jay, we've heard you've been spending some time. Oh, we haven't seen you at the Conquerors class or whatever, and it's just bizarre kind of stuff, um, or like the progressive church is like, we didn't see you at the Barbie party. What's going on there? Whatever. I don't know. I'm just making funny stuff up. You know, but there is that kind of thing. Like, I thought, I think I saw Jay with a Chick-fil-A cup the other day, and I'm really concerned. I thought he stood for something different. Like we're just constantly just watching for each other to have these moments of weakness, these moments of humiliation. And here, like this concept that read into Hegel's concepts of Christianity is that it's about humiliation. It's about the divided. It's about the loss. It's about this is what makes God able to be God and be tangible, to be broken, for us to be broken. It's like, it's not, you don't have to go to the church, or you don't have to have the Pope, or you don't have to have a mediator for us between you and God. God is with us, So love requires and needs this divided subject. So why Christianity? Why is Hegel interested in Christianity again? And that just comes down to the divine humiliation. And I will say it again, and I wrote this really big. Humiliation. Humiliation, folks. That's why. The humiliation. How often have we been humiliated by the church? How often does the church humiliate people? How much do we humiliate, you know what I mean? So this concept of suffering, of giving up power, of being less than, of being humiliated, is the concept that's like, was like, oh, this is special. This is like one of the greatest philosophers of our time, some would argue, and some would also say he was full of shit. But this is what he's getting out of this concept. It's much deeper than anything that we grew up hearing. This vicious cycle that we lay in. For me, I suffer from depression, and like yesterday I was like super, like I just was overwhelmed with like just like this darkness, and I didn't know why. I mean, yeah, I was thinking we'd lost Steve, and then, silly as it may sound, Pee Wee Herman was an important part of my childhood, and like, and Sinead O'Connor was an important part of my teenage years and even adult years, and these are people like I really meant things to me, or past and gone, and so there was just a lot of like grieving and the reality of like paying bills and trying to get life, and like things don't get easier, but I couldn't pinpoint it, I just was depressed. I was in a dark place. And I kind of just needed to sit with it and just go like, okay, this is where I'm at. I'm in a moment of grief. I'm in a moment of darkness. I'm in a moment of, I can't put a word on it. I just have to kind of sit with this feeling and know that it's a feeling, and there it is, But I have those feelings a lot more than I have these feelings of like victory, you know? Like sometimes I think like a lot of these like really positive preachers, I guess like Joel Osteen maybe or something like that. I'm like, what kind of mental health issues do these guys have, and where do I get one? To Hegel, this idea of humiliation is profound. Humiliation of God in Christianity is the source of freedom. Is a source of freedom. I mean, why humiliation of God in Christianity is a source of freedom that it provides. It provides us with a source of freedom to be in our low points, to be in our darkness. Now, for me, this is a side note that I wrote. But this just before I go to my side note, this is what Hegel says, that Christianity was the what Christianity said something that this is probably where we want to cancel Hegel. This is where you're going to cancel Hegel, okay? If you're already, some of you have already been like, I don't like what he's saying. And that's okay. I get it. First few times I read stuff like this, wasn't that comfortable either, because I was raised to believe a tradition rather than actual like scholarship and deep thinking and proper theology and proper philosophy. You know, I had a lot of these guys who were just like, and then we got to prove that this happened and that this happened, you know, and and it was all about proving everything had to be 100%, and that, you know, dinosaurs were not real, or that we rode on them, or whatever, you know. Well, we got to do away with science, you know, this fear of reality, of being broken, of being humiliated, if you will. But this is where you might want to cancel Hegel, because this is what made Hegel say that Christianity was the one and only true religion. That this was the one religion, this was the true religion, was this idea of a humiliated God. So that's why that's what Hegel said. It's what he believed. He believed Christianity was the truth, you know? And so he probably won't be sharing that at the interfaith prayer meeting with everybody. But that's how Hegel felt. Now, but for me, this idea of this broken Christianity, humiliation of God, is a reason I can stay part of it. I mean, I remember a moment where my faith was pretty much gone after my second divorce, you know, and Revolution was like, which it has been for probably the past 10 years, really financially struggling. And I'm going like, do I quit? Do I stay? What do I do? And I was just in the shower, like by myself, crying. And the image of Christ going, my God, why have you forsaken me? Like just tortured, almost like the Mel Gibson movie, hit me, going like, okay, God felt abandoned. Christ felt abandoned by God. This is where I am. I am suffering with Christ right now. You know, this is where I am. I too want to know why I've been forsaken. You know, and my faith, whatever it is, or my belief, or whatever it is, survived. The contradiction makes it real. The being less than conquerors was what got me through. The humiliated God was what made it true. We just like to rewrite the story and rewrite the script for our time. You know, I mean, I think that's why so many people hold dearly the book of Revelation, and which we talked about a few weeks ago, is because it's like an action movie with Jesus coming back and kicking ass. And people want that. They want that to be eventually happen. That's going to be the victory. Even though we're going to have to suffer, Jesus is going to come back and kick butt and then take us all home, and we're going to have a party, you know, separated from people we love or care about, which, like, that's not a party. That's just jail, even if it's a nice jail. So like a Swiss jail. So it's not the Pope or the church. There is no intercessor obscuring the divine. We are connected to the divine. There is no Wizard of Oz. I think that's the best way of saying it, you know? Or there is no man of God. You know, I've knew these evangelical preachers who would be like, well, I'm the man of God. You do not question the man of God. You know, they would set up this really weird hierarchy. And this is how they were like, a lot of these guys were really rich, and that's why you didn't want to question the man of God, because his house is a bit big and his cars are really nice, so you do not question the man of God. And so there is no man of God, and if you've read anything like in the Bible, you probably know that. like just read Galatians, you'll know there's no man of God or woman of God. And there's no Wizard of Oz. There's no Wizard of Oz there with, I'm the great Oz. It's like the man behind the curtain. Really, that is it. Just a guy, trying to get the bing, 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 keep the facade going. Hegel said something that was very interesting. He said, no more slavery. Even though slavery did continue, but he would say, if Christians really truly understood this concept, there would be no slavery, because we are all connected to this God one by one. There's no slavery, there's no mediator. So you're like just your brothers and sisters when you do slavery, and you treat slavery, or you treat people as though that you are the mediator, that there's any other mediator. That's it. Boom. So there should be, obviously we know there should be no slavery, but it's funny that a lot of you folks who enjoy capitalism don't realize that that's how capitalism got its start, because free labor. Oh, what do you know? And now we're turning kind of into that. Oh, no, what do you know? It is this idea that these are our brothers and sisters. And that's also why when we start, I'm going to go into my own message here, is why I would step out and say why grace fits in here, is because then there's no othering, there's no scapegoating, there's no doing this thing. There's learning to trust people a little bit more in their own walks in life, and then there's able to have these tough conversations and hard conversations, because there's a little bit more of not like, I really represent God, and I really have the truth because I read the right book. I follow Dan McClellan on, I listen to his talks, so I've got it kind of figured out, and you don't. It's not about that anymore. It's not about victory. It's not about winning. It's not about having your life together. It's not about having peace that passes all understanding all the time. Final fact is, I find that peace that passes all understanding to be that time of when we have peace in the midst of our tears, when I find peace in the midst of the fact that I don't know why God's left me, and I feel like a little bit of peace because I think, wow, this must be how Jesus felt. It's like, those moments, those little poof that you can't really put into words or explain, but they're just those moments of sharing in the humiliation. So, remember this. For Hegel, it's to set up like the God as the victorious God, or this type of slavery, this as a betrayal, because for Hegel that is a betrayal to the foundations of Christianity, that Christianity is built on, is this mediator or this victorious thing. Most of us restore the divine position, though. That's what we'll do it. And I had to write this. I have and I do. Most of us like to get God, this concept of a humiliated God, out and restore this divine figure, this mystery. Because Hegel said, like, this idea of God, it's a mystery and we don't know, and his ways are greater than ours. And it felt like that was heresy. Really felt like that was heresy often. And Hegel believed, I just read it in my note, Hegel believed that the real heretics are those who believe in the unknown God, which I have a book where I talk about believing in the unknown God. So, ouch. That doesn't feel good, Mr. Hegel. Harsh, I know. But in order to avoid knowing God suffers, a lot of us will do whatever we can to get in line in order to avoid of knowing the suffering that the same humiliation as us, that God understood it. What did I put? Get online, get in line, get on. I don't know what I'm saying here. But Hegel believed that the heretics are those who believe in kind of this unknown, mysterious, victorious God. And like I said, that stings a little bit. Because most of us have this idea of restoring it. Or when we're going through a hard time, why we say God is a mystery when we're suffering often, or why we're going through stuff when my mom had cancer and things like that. And it's God's ways and not our ways, is because we've been told that God will heal you and God is victory and then all you got to do is pray and all you got to do is this. And we've had these very simplistic understandings of Christianity that have been handed to us by these like American evangelicals who don't understand the biblical history and its true foundations, don't seem to have the proper scholarship in their lives. And so they think, oh, yeah, it's all 100% true and all this. So we think, oh, well, God's got to be more than victor and all this stuff. So God must be a mystery if my mom died, and it must have been God's will that those little children died, or even the opposite, like, oh, my kid survived, so God was watching out for my child. But basically you're saying that God wasn't watching out for the other 10 children who were killed. Like God was like, I don't really have time for that one. I thought was special, so I saved for you because you say your prayers at night and take your vitamins. That's what we're saying when we say those things. So this kind of makes sense in a way. Now I've stripped this way down. Like I went into this book that Todd McGowan wrote is not an easy book to understand. Some of it's like, you'll read a chapter and it's like, and then the next chapter is like, oh, this is really great. I'm really getting something out of it. And then the next chapter is like, oh, this is really dense and hard to understand what's going on. And so I've been reading this book for years and always getting something new out of it. So I think what we're hearing here is that this is not the everyday right or left type of Christianity that we all know. And I'm not saying that this is Christianity. What I'm saying is to think about this and put this into your wheelhouse or into your mind and your brain and work through it. Think about it, struggle with it, work it out. Maybe go get the Hegel book, maybe look into this more, because I know that there's a lot of foundational stuff that this pushes against. But why is Hegel, someone who really knew Christianity, understood it quite well, it was a very big part of his life, wrote on it, this topic quite a bit from the earliest point of his career. Where does this come from? Why does I think some really great books on this are P. Rollins wrote some really great stuff that I feel like is accessible to this. One I think is The Divine Magician and The Orthodox Heretic. No, not the Orthodox. The Divine Magician is one, and I'll try to figure out the other one. I'm doing book recommendations and all this stuff on Instagram, so we'll pull those books out as well. Just don't tell him, because his head can't get much larger. Hegel would believe that the fundamentalists are really betraying the core of our religion, and by completely missing the humiliated God. And I think a lot of us will think that we are missing the point of the humiliated God by trying to I think when we miss the idea of trying to understand the other rather than, but instead of we want to have victory over the other, like this, and we make that a faith thing, and I think that's more of a human thing than like a religious thing, but for some reason we've cranked it up and like my chocolate got mixed with my peanut butter. We've really put in there like victory is somehow a part of religion and God being on my side and on my team and answering my prayers and not your prayers and, that crap. It doesn't work, folks. It doesn't work. And I think we've built it so strongly into Christianity that we miss something on both the right and the left, Like I watch the left, and they're always celebrating victories over the right, like in Christianity. And I tell you why. That's why we don't call Revolution Church and all that stuff, because it's just such a bad taste in my mouth. And I think we miss it. Like when we humiliate the other, they're sharing in something with Christ. They're sharing in something with God when we humiliate them on behalf of the powers that be, on behalf of religion. When we humiliate them, they're sharing in the suffering of God, whether it be rightfully humiliated or not. This is the true struggle, folks. This takes Christ off the cross and throws him into a shit job. Like, I always, like, when I lived in Linwood, and I'd go to the McDonald's by my house a lot, and I saw these folks working really hard at McDonald's, and then I remember seeing them and going like, hey, do I know you from somewhere? And like, yeah, I work over at McDonald's, because I saw them over at the grocery store, and they're working on these two jobs. And so in my way, that's where Christ just stripped down and he's put into the two jobs, the divine humiliation, the divine realization of suffering, of living life, of having to live the life of being humiliated and being controlled by a system that's greater than them, a system that's taken over. So Christ doesn't come off the cross and get on the golden throne. For me, Christ comes off the cross right into being the broken kid who grew up to be a pastor and doesn't even have a live congregation anymore, and just talks on those weeks, and has been through 2 divorces and is trying his best to raise 2 kids. That's, for me, if I want to relate to Christ, that's where I relate to, not like, oh, I've written 3 books and that was, it's relating to, like, this is living life on life's terms. So it ends up looking as though that God is not very godly in Christianity. That God doesn't end up being as godly. In Hegel's concept of Christianity, doesn't seem to be very godly by rolling and throwing down fires and doing all these things and that, but something happens. Something that's a picture of showing us the divide, the humiliated God, that contradiction is going to be a part of our lives. For a long time. And I say that in a very Hegelian way, not in just like, saying one thing and doing another. So, but then maybe grace is the miracle that, the grace is the miracle because it really does rely more on the broken God, and on the humiliated God, on the humiliated divine. And that grace that says, accept that you're accepted, you're loved, no matter who you are, no matter what you've done. All fall short of glory, but yet God in his gracious kindness declares us not guilty. Maybe that concept of grace, grace, not works, not these other things, maybe that's that's part of the humiliation as well. If you really think about it, and if you really roll it into your head, and like I do, because I'm an overthinker, it takes me forever to fall asleep because I'm just thinking. Sometimes it's a blessing, and sometimes it's a curse, but I find it more of a blessing because I get to do this stuff, and this is what I love, is talking to you all about this. I never thought I would be talking to you all about Hegel, probably the 3rd time now, but that's been part of really having great friends, and be honest with you, just continually questioning and feeling like, oh, this is tough. How can I go on? And you're saying like, oh, I want to know more about these deep thinkers who went on and what they thought about this. And then finding good news discovering good news within someone like Hegel, is pretty cool. Or, even Dan, who I mentioned earlier, like I didn't think I like a Mormon, a Mormon scholar would be like one of my favorite biblical scholars, and I never thought that was going to happen, and look, there it is, So be open to the new and to the mysteries, and what I hope really right now though is what you leave with is more of a sense of peace than a sense of despair. Like, oh, God's not in control. But you're like, oh, God was humiliated, and gosh, life was humiliating, and I don't suffer alone. That's what I hope, that you see that type of grace. And that, if you go, oh, Jay, I've got it kind of figured out, got it kind of, tuned in, then I hope you're going to say like, well, then this type of grace I need to give to other people, because when I see other people humiliated and doing these things and going through this, maybe there's a little bit of something that they can learn in that as well. So thanks for tuning in this week. I must say this because I got a call from our financial folks in New York saying, hey, have you been raising money? Because it's not there anymore, and you need to do that because you're not going to be able to get paid, and we're not going to be able to be fulfilling, the paychecks and our pay and things like that. So please tell people that there's a need, and that Revolution could really use their support of the people financially. So I know often I say, if you can't give anything, just retweet, and that's still the same. But if you can give anything will do at this point and really help us continue to do this work. And there isn't us, there's a few of us, but you are also part of us. And if you like this and what you see here and what we're doing here, and you like the fact that I can come in and talk to you about Hegel every now and then and other, Kierkegaard and things like that, it's because I have the time to sit down and read these books and study these books, because I was not I did not go to Bible college or seminary. I've taken classes at those places, but I've never been able to really go on my own. I also am a father of two who is really focused on their children. So I'm blessed enough that you make it possible for me to have these books and read these things and do this and make a living doing this and keeping Revolution going. And I don't know what the future of Revolution is, but I know what Revolution is now, and this is where we're at now. But we can't do it without your financial support. And you can go to revolutionchurch.com. There's a which we do this. You can follow us online too, because we're going to be doing other stuff on different areas. And I'll talk more about that later. But there's a Venmo and a PayPal. A lot of people hated PayPal, so we added Venmo. And then the financial folks were like, hey, it's been a long time getting that Venmo, and we haven't brought much through the Venmo, so maybe give the Venmo a spin and see how that one works as well. And they're tax deductible. At this point, we're still tax deductible. So there you go. Thanks, folks. I appreciate your time with me. And we will, this was a tough one, man. Anytime you talk about Hegel, it just feels like, it's like trying to get through a strainer or something. It's tough, and especially trying to strip it down and choosing what to keep and what to take away. I obviously can't do it its full justice, but I will recommend some books in the future of better ways to kind of understand some of these philosophers that we talk about, and lead you in the way of other philosophers. Like I said, Pete Rollins is my buddy, and he's really great on this stuff as well. So maybe give him a follow and check out some of his work as well. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your help. Thank you for support. Thank you for making this life of almost 30 years possible. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed this podcast. To make your 100% tax-deductible donation today, please visit revolutionchurch.com/donate. You can also learn more by clicking the donate section on the website.